personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors is a reason to move into a closed session. So if there's going to be discussion about potentially staff matters, then it's appropriate that it will be dealt with or discussed in that form.
All right. Okay, so we will move item 9.2 into 13 confidential. We need to you
need a mover and a seconder.
I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. All right. If we could move to apologies. We have no apologies. Everybody is present. Thank you. Either in attendance or in conference. Declarations of peculiar interest and special disclosures. I'll start off with item 6.3. It's a non-pecuniary, non-significant. I will leave the room in case anyone feels that I may influence it. It relates to a decision about a neighbouring property. Anybody else?
Yes, I have one.
Sorry, Councillor Turner, then to you, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in 6.6. I'm a regular presenter on the radio station Yass FM 100.3, and I'm only a presenter, and I will stay for the consideration and for the determination.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yes, I've got non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in the same item, 6.6, the community grants. I'm a member of the Progress Association and the Men's Shed, and I work with the marketing committee. So I will decline to vote.
Thank you. Are there any others, councillors? Councillor Jones.
So I have a pecuniary interest to declare for 9.1, and the reason for disclosure is a business interest.
9.1. So you'll be looking to leave the room.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm only a presenter.
All right. Thank you, councillors. Are there any other? Councillor Frost.
Madam Mayor, I'll just note, because I don't think it's worth even doing the declaring an interest, but I just note that similar to Councillor Turner, I'm also a presenter on Yass FM. However, I think there's such a tenuous link that I don't declare an interest in.
Madam Mayor, if I may clarify, I was on the committee that was considering grants. Hence the declaration.
Hence the declaration. Thank you. All right. Okay, if we can then move to confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 22nd of April. Can I have a mover and seconder for that?
With one correction.
Yes, Councillor Jones moved. Councillor Jones.
In the item 6.3.
Second, Councillor Turner.
In the item 6.3, the mover was Frost, not Jones. As I voted against it, I thought I could point that out.
We could just note that changing.
I think I look like you at all.
Just looking.
All right, we were moving quite quickly through our meeting. So, okay, with that noting, I have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Jones and Councillor Turner. All those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Are there any items anybody wishes to bring up out of that meeting? Okay, moving to Mayoral Minute, which there isn't one this meeting. We'll move to Director of Planning and Environment reports. There are 6 of them, I think. I'll just run through it just quickly. 6.1. Councillor Ferry wants to speak. 6.2, Warren Bateman Road. Councillor Jones. Ross Eye Street. I'm out, so we'll have to wait till I leave. 6.4, Hillview Road. If there's questions, I can Manus. 6.5, carport at Gundaroo. Oh, got one. And community grants round 2. We'll have one leaving, so we'll have to do it. So could I have a mover and seconder for 6.5, carport at Loop Street, Gundaroo? So moved, Councillor Burgess. Thank you, and Councillor Ferry. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to 6.1. local strategic planning statement. Councillor Ferry.
Madam Mayor, I'm choosing not to move or second it, but I'm intending to speak against, just for the record.
Okay, right. Do I have a mover and seconder? I have a mover, Councillor Jones. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Frost? Thank you. Now, anybody wish to speak for, and then I'll go to the against. Okay, Councillor Ferry.
Very quick. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Likewise, I'll be very quick. I'm choosing to vote against the recommendation today for the reasons that were stated equally in the October 2019 meeting. I spoke about it then. I don't think there's any need to repeat myself. But additionally, with great concern with some of the commentary we've gotten back from the agencies, which is in our report. So those are the reasons for vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to it?
Happy to close. We now have a local strategic planning statement draft. We are being asked to adopt this, and this strengthens our position in terms of how we do battle as a small council. And we do battle from time to time as a small council against well-heeled developers wanting to encroach and change and steer us away from our settlement strategy. What does that mean to us? It means that other agencies, other private commercially orientated agencies, want us to change the way we do business, want to change our budget, want to force us to build infrastructure where we have already decided that we don't need it or want it, or it's against the principles of how we want to see our community grow and flourish. This is a key document the department has said will strengthen our position. How could you not want this? Everything in our settlement strategy that we worked with the community on, we did workshops, we took it out, we brought it back in, we asked for comments, we adjusted it, we asked for comments from the ACT government, we asked for comments from the planning department. We have incorporated all of that with the skill of our staff. Why would you now want to reject it, knowing that this strengthens our position, stops us from spending money that we don't have in building infrastructure and servicing communities away from those key growth areas of Yass and Murrum Bateman? We should be getting behind this 100%, and I'm a bit disappointed that our deputy mayor has chosen not to back it, but I have to respect that view. But as far as I'm concerned, this gives us the teeth that we don't have.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for or against it? You can. Well, actually, Councillor Jones is.
I suppose it's sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, no, she had to vote. My apologies. All right, those in favour? Is everyone those against? Councillor Ferry. I can just note Councillor Ferry voted against that. Thank you. 6.2 planning proposal 80 Murrum Bateman Road, Murrum Bateman. Councillor Jones, can you go ahead and down to that to start with?
Bit of a word of the catch-up.
That's all right.
A skim old style through paper. Look, I just wanted to first put the recommendation.
Seconded the recommendation. Councillor McManus, thank you.
And secondly, I wanted to get a comment from the Acting Director of Planning, thank you, on what are the steps to ensure that due diligence is done on water supply. And I just want to flesh out that we are not ticking off on this. It's up to the appointments, as I understand it, to meet the requirements.
Through you, Madam Mayor, as these lots proposed are 2 hectares in size, they will be relying on rainwater harvesting and access to groundwater. As part of the next steps process, this will get referred off to New South Wales Office of Water, and they will determine whether any additional studies are done to prove up the yield of any groundwater supply.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for or against? All those in favour? All those against? No. Right, motion carried. Moving to 6.3, development consent residential subdivision, Ross Ice Street. I'll just remove myself and hand over to Councillor Murray.
you, councillors. We have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Frost, seconder. Seconder for the recommendation.
I have a
Right.
question.
Councillor Roux.
Sorry, Mike, thank you, sorry. I'm usually tuning in as well, so this is a first for me. Hello. Councillor Jones, unless the mover wishes to speak first. Okay, Councillor Jones.
If I could just seek clarification from the director has the expertise in this area regarding the fencing, in reducing it to rural, from rural residential to rural, are we matching what's there, or are we lowering the standard, and are we exposing ourselves to issues of complaints of dogs, access, you name it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we've done a bit of an assessment and on-site check of similar subdivisions in the last few days, and it appears we have been fairly consistent, or we have been consistent in our application of rural residency on similar subdivisions, and that's the original reason why this condition was included in the original approval. So this was just seen as a bit of a concession that to the applicant. So if councils have in mind to ensure that consistent application of fencing, then that can be adjusted to the fencing.
Sorry, can I
This
seek
is
one more
something-
clarification?
yes,
It's the
Councillor
same
Jones.
question anyway.
Oh, good, yeah, no, go.
No, you finish. I might.
So in changing, are we pulling back to the barbed wire option, or are we getting rid of the barbed wire option? I don't have clarity.
It's netting or barbed wire?
Netting, I think it's netting.
It's netting. So if we ditch 3, we're back to netting. Is that correct? Thank you.
So the recommendation in 3 is that the request not be supported. So if you adopt that recommendation, you are not supporting the request to vary.
Thank you.
That's what it says.
It starts with be reduced, so I was a bit put off. So as is.
Yeah, completely confused. Are we going with the netting or not?
You're not changing the condition. The recommendation says don't change the condition.
Councillor Mayor, hopefully this question will answer that. Okay, so in line with what Councillor Jones said, I was asking the same thing. Are we being consistent? So I think the answer you just said is, by not accepting that amendment, we are being consistent with the exception of barbed wire.
That's right.
So that's the only change. So every other development has had to do wire fencing, but they've had to put a barbed wire on. What we are now saying is we're okay with a wire, not a barb. But all the other specifications are the same as for every other resident. And I don't know that anyone would be upset with the removal of a barbed wire.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. Councillor Turner, did I see your hand up before?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Many moons ago, when I was in another life and in the Rural Lands Protection Board, the definition of a boundary fence or the preferred boundary fence was a rabbit-proof fence, a netting fence with wire dug in at the bottom, and that was the preferred option for a boundary fence. Over the years, with subdivision and bits and pieces, that standard has been lowered to some degree. It was advantageous to be rabbit-proof because there was a reduction in the rates if you had a certified rabbit-proof fence. What concerns me is
Sorry, Councillor Turner, continue.
what concerns me is that we have had some where the boundary fences have allowed to be ring lock. And if this is ring lock, then I'm voting against it. If it's netting, I'll stay with it. I'm very happy with plain wire at the top.
Is it netting or ring lock? Yeah, is it netting or not?
I'm going to say that as a question from 2 councillors at the same time.
Councillors, if you wish to have no barbed wire and just plain wire and netting, then I would suggest you adjust the wording of that third point to say that.
So Councillor Frost, you actually moved the recommendation, so if that's your intent,
I'm very
it'd
much
be
like
advisable.
Yeah, it is, but I've got a seconder and I'm not sure what the change of wording actually is.
Second is right there,
I
so,
think we need, maybe we just put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
just bear with us for a moment.
Uh,
We've just got that up here on the screen.
So perhaps something along the lines that the fencing standard for the subdivision be rural fencing with netting and plain wire, is that? And plain,
They want top
sorry,
wire plain gauge.
so top wire plain gauge, is that a better way of putting it? All right, okay.
Are we talking, that says for the subdivision, that's for the whole subdivision, including internal fencing? We're just talking boundaries, I think.
So you're just talking about the boundary fence, so you want to make it clear that the boundary fencing standard for the subdivision?
Yes.
Boundary fencing standard for the subdivision to be rural fencing with netting and plain wire, is that?
Yes.
Okay, and then the last bit can be just removed, is that right?
Plain wire top was a good suggestion. It's not a grade, it's not wire on there, it's just the top wire.
And are there any other parts of the fencing that need to follow on with the policy as is?
Well, the internal fencing tends to be an issue between neighbours under the Dividing Fences Act. With this fencing is mainly the external facing onto the public.
Oh, sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor. My concern is that by doing this without referencing the rest of the fencing policy, the height, the width, the length is all removed. You don't do it in accordance with the fencing policy with this is the adaptation.
Let's try and find the condition.
But the condition will still maintain references to height.
It's still in the detail.
All of the other conditions regarding the fencing stays, except this. Addition, not the
One change, which is the wire.
My seconder happy with that.
Well, it's a great question, Councillor Frost. Are the mover and seconder happy with the recommendation as it currently stands? It looks good. Okay.
Yep.
Consensus, excellent. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against the recommendation? Councillors, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's declared carried. Thank you, councillors. Could someone please bring the mayor back in? Thank you, Councillor Marshall.
So it's not absolutely. I was like, oh. Thank you, Nathan, that's right. I think this was cool. I've been waiting to give this. Going to confidential. Okay, so that was 6.3. So moving along to item 6.4. Hillview, 33 Hillview Drive, Murrum Bateman.
I've got a couple of questions before.
Councillor McManus, all questions? Yep.
I think I'll be moving the recommendation, but I'd just like comment from the staff. Why this farm? Why we ask this farm to submit a DA for internal roads where every other property, including bigger properties than this, have been able to get away with doing internal roads 100 years. I don't ever remember us actually getting an internal road. So that's the first one. Why has this fund been asked to submit an application? And would staff like to comment about Aboriginal and heritage matters, given that we're not going anywhere near the creek? So that's two. And the last one, we picked a funny number at 45,000. Should we actually give them a range from 45,000 to 55,000. So the 3 questions. Acting Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the reason why this proposal has required development application is the extent of fill that's being brought on to allow the construction of these roads. If they weren't exceeding the level under the compliant development SEP, they wouldn't be requiring a development application.
What level's that, Liz?
It's 100
100 cubic metres.
metres.
Is that all
So anything over 100 requires a development application.
on every farm?
Yes.
That's all right.
And this has been an ongoing issue where the amount of fuel that's being brought in is under the guise of doing works on associated with agricultural purposes.
Yeah.
But when essentially it's just a way to fill into properties. So
Whereas this has actually been they're doing the right thing by using it for roads and not just filling paddocks.
that's right.
We do have some examples around where people have brought in saying they're putting in a farm track that is wider than the Hume Highway.
Yeah, okay.
So
So over 100 metres, it's no longer compliant development. They should all be putting in the DA.
Yes.
And that's number 1. Thank you.
In regards to Aboriginal cultural heritage, this is a fairly standard requirement to undertake due diligence for the scale of development applications. There was also a reference or a question raised in one of the submissions in relation to Aboriginal cultural heritage, as was from the state agency New South Wales Environment, who advised that because of some of the landscape features that there was a higher likelihood that there could be some deposits. And just because a property is being farmed doesn't mean that they're not going to be evident, because often they come to the surface.
So could that be done with a desktop audit?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
As opposed to having someone, just so I understand the clarity in
To
that.
go out and do a survey.
To go and do a survey. So it could just
So
be done as
a good desktop audit may suffice.
Particularly around the topography of the
Okay.
Is your question, sorry, I'm just, because there's a couple of questions, your question on the same line, thank you, councillor Frost.
If someone is doing work and creating a road without leaving 100 cubic metres and they're just doing it on their own farm, they would be subject to.
Forgot.
They would be subject to
We're getting used to it.
the Aboriginal or heritage legislation, and they would be subject to biodiversity legislation. And so, why do we need additional staff for this one? Why can't we just? The only reason we're doing there is because we're worried about the amount of fill coming. Why are we putting a whole lot of extra stuff on that they're already subject to under those under existing?
So with the biodiversity as an example, it's because of the extent of disturbance under the new Biodiversity Conservation Act. Anything that's over a disturbance area of 1 hectare requires some additional work to be done. So because they've got a footprint of about 12 hectares with all the roads in total, they need to do some additional work.
All right.
Okay.
And the last one was the range.
Yep, it's yours along the same question in that relation, or a different question?
Or
I'll let them.
standards engineering.
Okay, so I'll let you answer the question on the engineering, which I think was what your
The
last
last
question
one
was.
was, pardon me, Madam Mayor, so that was there was heritage and Aboriginal, and the last one was we picked a number of 45 instead of and possibly a range of 45. How do we end up at 45? It was purely the calculation.
yeah, from my reading of the report, it was the calculation. So that look at the depth, the width, and the length.
12 by 3, 100 by 4.5.
That was to work out the quantity, and it was from memory it was round. There was a rounding up because for that reason, that trying to pick an exact number was always going to be a challenge. So there was an allowance there. The one major difference between what was requested and what's being recommended for approval is effectively the extra material for stockpiling purposes. And because there was no clear use for what that stockpile was supposed to be used for, we suggested that, look, come back and deal with that as a separate proposal. This should give them the scope to do all the work that they've requested. Certainly, if more material is needed because it's an underestimate, then of course there is the ability to make the adjustment. Yes.
Given it's stockpiling, it's been a problem
And that's
all
why
the way through. Are we better off allowing them 50,000 cubic metres with zero stockpiling?
at the end of the day, it's about the quantum of trucks on the road. Because that's the impact. So the bigger amount of fill you allowed, you're by default are accepting that there will be a significantly more trucks on the local road network, which has been the big issue with all filling jobs that we've had through the local government area. So what we've said is that rather than have a large amount of fill for your designated works, plus an amount for stockpiling for something in the future that we're not quite sure about, we're suggesting that approve what is certain, come back,
Which is the 45.
which is the 45, and then come back when you know what you want to do with the extra amount, and we'll deal with that at a future date when we know what the purpose is going to be. It's a prudent approach.
So that last one, would that be a staff matter, or would that come back to this room?
It will.
Can we make it a staff matter?
You could, but this particular one has come back to council because of the number of submissions that we received, and that's been in this particular case. If just because it's a large quantity of material, if there hadn't retracted the level of community input into it, it probably would have been dealt with by staff on technical grounds. But in this particular case, it was brought to council because of the level of public interest.
Because my understanding from the community has dissipated.
Uh,
I'm
it-
having better understanding of what's going on.
I think there's certainly, you could say that for some of the submitters, but there are still others that don't.
Councillor Huck.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in regard to the proponent's question about road standards, I wanted to direct the question wherever suitable to, are we being consistent with this with other rural farms? As in, have we ever asked any other farm to have the engineering compliance inspection that's noted in the DA, given that this DA is particularly more about fill than actual construction of roads? So I suppose I'm concerned, one, it potentially is a precedence and has not been asked of for other DAs. And if it's asked for in this one, will it become the new precedence moving forward for rural internal roads?
Yep.
Certainly, as the proponent mentioned in the open forum, from the edge of the council road to the fence needs to meet the appropriate standards, and that wasn't being questioned. It was certainly the issue of the standing internally. Certainly there is a potential argument there that you're applying a public road standard. It's not in our public road policy in terms of what we're saying. It's actually in the draft, also the fill policy that we've developed to try and quantify the amount. Certainly the conditions that are presented in the report are only draft conditions. I can certainly take that on board as before we finalise the consent in terms of whether we actually do need full working engineering construction drawings for what's effectively an internal driveway or road. So we can certainly look at reevaluate that. I suspect there's going to be two components: that what you do between the fence line and the pavement of the road, which is the standard requirement we make for everything, versus what's happening internally to the property.
Can I potentially on that make a suggestion to the mover?
We haven't got a bit.
I didn't do anything.
Oh, I thought you
No,
were thinking about moving
It was questions.
Questions. So you can move.
I was going to suggest that, I appreciate what you're saying, but I suppose I was looking for something more concrete in terms of as councillors making this decision. And it's a very serious precedent, and it is unfair that this proponent is subjected to this if everyone else isn't. That, appreciate the issue here is fill, so that there is an inspection on the fill, that they actually met the road standard, the 300 mil, and that council's satisfied that they've used the field for the purpose they've said, but they don't need, it's an internal farm road. They don't need an inspection to that level or to be held to construction standards of a road like that.
Does that expose us?
I guess my comment while you're thinking that one through would be, I think we're setting I'm concerned that we may be setting a precedent that makes it unworkable for the majority of the farming and agricultural community. I'd be loath to set us to that sort of engineering standard in terms of roads, because I think we all know farmers who've got plenty of roads. The fill, I think your point is valid, Alison, that the fill is the reason for the DA, not the actual engineering construction of the roads. If their roads sink because they didn't get enough gravel in it, then that's actually their problem, because none of us are going to be using those roads. So I'm concerned that we actually divide it into two sections. One, I definitely agree, we have a standard that has to be set between our road and their boundary. But I'm very concerned about setting precedent on internal farming roads that I'm not sure that we can live with everybody else.
Could I make us, if you want to do that, can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
The point number 2 says the development consent restrict the standard of internal access road construction to generally 4.5 by 300 and an overall maximum volume of 40,000, and then you can add to that, and the need for an engineering construction design for internal roads is not necessary.
Okay.
Something on those lines?
I think that, I'll just give Sheree a minute to actually type that up, and we can see it up on the screen in a minute. Do we need to note about my only other sections is item 1, bullet point 2, that we actually including in desk due diligence in protection of the Aboriginal artefacts, which can include a desktop study. Do we actually? I'm concerned that the way it reads.
The reason I asked that question is, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, if a desktop triggers something that they do, they may have to go further.
Well, they may have to.
But we can't set that. That's the reason I asked it is because the initial response of the applicant was he's going to have to do these Aboriginal studies. Well, he may very well not have to do that much. It may very well be a simple desktop audit, and if no triggers are triggered, that may be satisfactory. So that may be a full stop. But if it does trigger something, if they get out there and they find something on a desktop, then they have to go to the next standard. So that's why I didn't
understand that.
I didn't want to change the recommendation.
My concern is that the fact that they're concerned about it means that they don't understand. They can maybe just do the desktop.
I think that could probably best be done with a conversation between the director and the applicant.
And just try and make that clear to the applicant.
Yeah.
And that's the same with the biodiversity side of things. There may not be a lot of additional work that is required, but there are certain things that they need to set out. And if they do that, then that may satisfy them.
Okay. All right. So if we could just make that abundantly clear, because obviously the questions they're asking us to review is they're obviously not clear on that. So I think we owe them at least that to make it clear.
Was to try and help them understand.
Absolutely.
That's the question.
It was a good question to ask. Thank you. All right. So we now have some words up on the screen for us. Order to with the need for
So engineering, construction, design.
Internal roads is not necessary.
Not necessary. Is that? Sorry, it's not required.
So anyway, if we can pass on just for those clarification, often we all know that this gets some clarification. So Alison, you happy to move that? Yeah, thank you. Seconded. I think it doesn't matter. All right. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As much as I think it's a much improved motion, I wonder why we have the first parts. First parts there are state legislation that the applicant has to. What we're doing by putting it in our stuff is making ourselves a policeman. I'm wondering why we're bothering making ourselves a policeman for something that is basically a state government job. That's their job, is to do that. It's their act, they're to administer it. why are we making ourselves and giving ourselves work that we don't need to do by including it in this motion and as part of this? Because this is not our job.
So through you, Madam Mayor, the simple answer to that one is that it is now a requirement for us to deal with under the planning legislation as part of our assessment. We can't set it aside.
Furnish with consent until those matters are addressed.
We've made it our business.
Somebody made it their business.
State government's made it our business. Okay, on that basis, because we don't get a choice in it. Any other questions for or against? All right, we'll take a vote. Moved, Harker and Yass. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yep, that's everyone. Thank you very much. And thank you, Acting Director, if you could pass on those comments and feedback, much appreciated. Right, moving to 6.6, Councillor Reid, I think you were going to remove yourself from it at the moment, so if you just want to leave your room.
I'll move to the left.
Can't stand in the cold.
Do not come back with a glass of wine. Thank you. Right, moving to item 6.6, community grants.
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
You have a question, Councillor Jones.
Happy to see this recommendation moved, although I note that there's now a kitty of 6,550 remaining. And I was just wondering, the process for putting that into the next round of community grants, is that automatic, or do we need to specify that it's going to be held over to the next community grants? Or does it go into a larger bucket and then we have to?
Surely you've found
Through
somewhere
you,
to
Madam
spend the money.
Mayor.
I've spent it 20 times over, believe me.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think council's already made that decision a number of years ago, that if there was anything left over, that we would revote that into and carry that through to the next round of the next
The exact
financial year.
same bucket. Just wanted to clarify that we didn't have to specify that. Thank you.
And through you, Madam Mayor, there was also a proposed workshop for grant writing, which was delayed due to COVID, and hopefully with restrictions lifted, we can release that.
All right, do I have a mover?
I'll move
Councillor McManus,
I'll
thank
move the
you.
recommendation and a vote of thanks to Councillor Harker and Turner and the staff for providing the report.
Well done, thank you. It's always quite hard work going through the grants programs.
Painful.
Right. All right, Councillor Turner.
If I may just make a comment,
Who seconded?
Madam Mayor. I'll second it despite.
You,
Councillor
says did, sorry.
Madam Mayor, just like to note that in the deliberation with Councillor Harker and myself, I expressed a concern that we actually in this application have a group of 3 under one incorporation number, a group of 2 under another incorporation number, and a national incorporation. I expressed a concern that the policy leads itself towards an umbrella incorporation, basically dominating the whole of the process. I've discussed it with the relevant officer, and we've come up with a suggestion. And I would like to think that might come to the next meeting for a variation to the policy, just to clarify the situation of umbrella incorporations and the potential for the transparency of this to go by the board with a block like, and I use the terminology loosely because there are 3 very separate organisations underneath the Progress Association, but there's a possibility of that dominating the grant process, and the smaller villages like Banalong, Barming, etc., missing out unless we have some form of clause in the policy which basically says that in anything over 2 projects under the same incorporation, the other one gets the preference. It's just to try and clarify the situation, to make it clearer for the applicants that they have every bit of a chance of getting the money if they're a small community grant or big village.
All right, thank you.
And that I hope will come to council.
So we have a mover and seconder. Anybody else wish to discuss it? Right, those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Councillor Reid, if you'd like to come back.
Someone don't tell me.
Come back into the room.
He's back.
Oh, he's back. And no wine, it's all good. All right, if we can move to the Director of the Infrastructure and Assets report, Walker Park Facilities Upgrade Project. Councillor Furry and Councillor McManus. Thank you. I think we've had various iterations of this go through, and I think now that all the sporting clubs have actually had a chance to have input, I think we have a really good long-term outcome for our communities. Well done, Councillor McManus.
Going to public tender, or we doing this be under the existing contract or something?
I think we've been to tender on this one. Yeah.
But with the designs change.
Yes, but that was within the original scope.
Right, it's all right.
That's my, because if you
So there's
remember.
no delay. The reason I asked, is
You don't want
we're not
to.
playing footy at the moment.
No.
Now's the time to build it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, from memory, the plan that originally came to us was then needed to be modified to meet the requirements for the Building Code of Australia. So a revised design was actually done.
So we're going back almost to the original design.
Almost to the original, yeah.
Right. So there should be no reason for a delay.
There shouldn't be. We'll double and triple check, but I don't think there's any need for it to be delayed.
Thanks, Chris.
Right, moving to all those in favour. Thank you. No, we got that one. Moving to the Yass water treatment plant upgrade. I think there was an amended motion came
Councillor
around.
Frost, yes.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, this is, actually the second amendment version, was a version circulated by the General Manager.
Yep.
And then I've added a point at the end of it. Which
one?
Part 5, I can't see it anymore. Essentially, Madam Mayor, this process, and having read the draft report, which was circulated to councillors, and I think thanks for that. Having read the draft report, it's very clear that the way that the study was undertaken, it built on what we already have. It started off thinking about what we already had and what had to be changed and how we might build on that. At the end of that, we came to a conclusion that really we're probably better off to start again. But the processes that we're thinking about using are the same as what we've got in our original design. In other words, it's heavily pushed towards that. And so what is not there is any thought, or is I would say sufficient thought, about what new technologies might be employed. And in this case, it's worth noting that in 2016, when Public Works looked at this, they looked and said that they included a couple of processes, one of which involved reverse osmosis. Now, I don't know whether reverse osmosis is the right way to go or not, but I don't think this report has considered it well enough. And I think what we need to do is to go through the list of things. Let's get off and get looking for the money. And also, let's go back and say, is this the best technology that we can put in place? And what's not there that I would also make a point of noting is that the amount of capacity that's in all of those things is 13 megalitres a day, which was what was designed for the plant in 1990. And I don't see any discussion in any of this about whether that's an appropriate amount of capacity or whether we should have more. And I would think it would be fairly. My guess is we probably should be looking at more. So if we're starting again, and I think that's a great idea, let's go and start again. But if we're starting again, let's make sure we get the right technology and let's make sure we get the right capacity. And so what I've asked, what I'm suggesting with that is something there that says to the consultants, go back and have a look at those two issues at least, and all the other things, seeing we're starting again, and make sure we've got those right. So we get the very best plan, not just one that's adequate.
So moved, or seconded, sorry, yes. So I just have a question. When they were looking and they came back to us a report, did they not consider other technologies? Do we know?
It's not really. I think probably Chris is more
Yeah.
qualified to answer the series.
Look, I think again, I wasn't involved in all the workshops that were there with the various consultants and the various experts in the room. So if they did and discounted them, it's clearly not come through in the report.
It'll be easy.
But if they haven't, and by bringing it to their attention, it can certainly be in the next wave. As I've seen this, is that really what we've got is that we've got a blank. We started with a blank canvas. We've now got, if you like, a number of overarching options of which we're trying to narrow down, so that when we get into the detail work, that we're not looking at things that are off the table. We're just trying to concentrate on the things that are practical and are on the table. And if that means we need to adjust things like technology and capacity when we do that detail work, then it will come out and emerge out of that process. And I think point 5 is adding to that and making it certainly very clear in our mind that that's what the expectation is for the next phase of the work in terms of
It talks
development.
about the technologies, but doesn't talk about the capacity.
Well,
So
again, if
do
you
wanna
wanted to add
in
that,
there?
incorporation of alternate technologies and capacity and seeks advice, yep.
Yeah. I just think we may as well cover it if you raise the issue. I think it's a good thing to raise. Okay, does anyone else wish to speak for or against it or have questions? Councillor Jones.
I would like to thank Councillor Frost for his amendment. I'm certainly a lot more comfortable going forward with this. I know that the community have talked about reverse osmosis, and without us having exactly all the options on the table to say we have considered the Rolls Royce of this and we have considered the Rolls Royce version of that, I think we're not doing our due diligence, and this gives us every opportunity to be agile as we move forward, while at the same time asking for the money.
Let's not forget that.
Get ready to get hold.
All right, okay, councillors, any other questions? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everybody. And we can move to the Director of Corporate and Community Reports, the Investment and Borrowing Report, 8.1. I need a mover and seconder for noting the report. Councillor Turner, Councillor Furry, thank you. Are there any questions or in relation to the report? Okay, all those in favour? That's everyone, thank you. Moving to 8.2, third quarter budget review statement. Can I get a mover and seconder for that one? Councillor Frost, thank you. Councillor Harker, thank you. We keep forgetting Councillor Reid. I'm going to let Councillor Reid have the second on that one. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Frost, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've commended the report. I think it's excellent. There's a couple of concerns I have, and it's about our general direction. About our general direction. One is, I'm sort of concerned that we've got ourselves into a position where we actually send back close to recovery money. I know it's mentioned here as a minor adjustment, but $100,000 is not very minor if you're talking about community projects, or you could have done anything else. And, I think it's one of those areas that we need to make sure we never make again, because we do have a lot of flexibility about how to spend that money and to not spend it. I think it's unfortunate. Second is the concern that I have is that our staffing numbers are not necessarily staffing numbers, but the amount that we're spending on staff is actually reduced over the year by about $500,000. I think it's 160,000 for this quarter, but $500,000 over the full year, less than what we planned for. And I know that the general manager and staff are trying to address that, but I think it's something we need to continuously be aware of, that we we do need to have staff if we're going to do this. And if people are going to, if particular other governments, state and federal governments, are going to come to us and say, we want you to spend money on shovel-ready projects, we've got to have the capacity to do that. So we need to get the staffing up, and I think it's something that we need to focus on going forward. That's my reading from here. I'm sure other councillors will be.
We've got to move in. So, yes, Councillor Hackett, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you to the director, I think on Zoom. It was just a question on page 176 about emergency services expenditure due to bushfire. And I suppose whether that's a once-off or recoverable expense from state.
Yeah, Mark?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, it's dropping in and out. Yes, it is a, as I understand it, a one-off this time round.
I'm sorry, that actually broke up the entire conversation there, Mark. So do you want to try it again?
It's easy to call him on his phone.
Okay, we're going to try and call you on the phone, I think. Hang on, I got it. I get it. Speak up. Technology, it's beautiful stuff. Put him up on big volume. Hi, Mark. It still wasn't coming through. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. So the answer to Alison's question, which related to the bushfire expenses.
Yes, as far as I understand, that 100%, but my memory of it was a one-off, expenditure due to bushfires. That it was put across, to all councils.
So it's not a recoverable one from the state government, I think was the question.
I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure the answer to that part of the question.
All right. If you could maybe get back to us just via email following up on that, that would be appreciated.
Yes, well,
So sorry, through you, just to clarify, Mark.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I suppose that was you partly answer my question is, was that a cost in, it's unlikely that we have heard that cost. Is it a cost that was spread out over the councils? And as said, there has been significant grants and recovery money around. Is that something that we could recoup? Or is that just a cost that's been sort of put to us as prorated with the other councils?
As far as I understand, it's pro-rata as per the other councils, but I'll certainly follow up in terms of recouping. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'll try going back to Zoom.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Are there any other questions, councillors? In that case, all those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. And if we move to the next item, 9.1, General Manager's Report, I think Councillor Jones, you were doing out. Just an independent. Okay, so Councillor Ferry, you're going to move.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll wait for a second.
Can we have a seconder for that, please? In relation to the independent ombudsman. We're just noting their report. Yep. Can I have a seconder?
Mike.
Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Well done.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
I'm in there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, the report speaks for itself. We've made multiple attempts to work with all parties referenced on this issue, and in doing so and ensuring that process is fully recorded and open to the public. This is why this report's been put together and noted. All attempts have been made, and we're noting it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Mayor, this is one of the saddest reports I can remember since I've been on this council. We in Denise Smith are probably two of our finest citizens, and they really are. Their natives are here, they built businesses, they built families, they've done all of those things. They're community minded, they work hard, they're generous, all of those things. And this report says that we couldn't deal in a way that complied with our probity report. And the probity report said let's have a look at these issues. And we've been, as an organisation, we've been unable to deal with this in a satisfactory way, except in the very sort of gross way of you can deal with us now if you can prove that we're criminal or that we've ripped off money or whatever. In a very hard. That's what we're left with those three points as to how we might deal with. And I'm not don't want to go into the detail of who does what, but I think it's time we should look and say we should be able to do this better. That when we've got fine citizens, that we should be able to deal with them in a way that can come to a better result than this. And I really won't say any more than that, other than, and I think we ought to look at ourselves and as a complete organisation and say, how could we have done that?
Before I let you close the debate, if I just may make a comment as well. I think the problem is not necessarily whether the individuals involved are good, bad, or indifferent. It's actually not a personal issue about their standing in the community. It's about an issue that we can't get a resolution through a completely independent person of council, and that's what we've tried really hard to do. You can't keep calling everybody who's independent that they have a compromise when they've never met you, they don't know anything about you. It's very difficult to make a resolution when when the proponents actually won't discuss it with anyone and think that everybody else is actually acting against them, which is actually not the case with Centim. They've actually tried very hard. But if they then get called into account, then how are you supposed to resolve it in a way that doesn't cost our ratepayers a lot of money to try? We have tried, personally, I think everyone's tried extremely hard to actually resolve this in a way that had an outcome for everybody, but unfortunately we haven't been able to get to where I think we had all hoped we would get to. I don't think there's anyone in the room that didn't want a resolution out of this. If you'd like to close, Councillor Frew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there anyone who wanted to speak for a close? No. I thought it'd be rather remiss of me, Madam Mayor, not to take the opportunity to thank staff and certainly the independent ombuds themselves and councillors who I know have spent many time out of hours on weekends, in fact, missing time from family, friends and other activities in an attempt to try and get this issue resolved. Every effort's been made, in my opinion, and we have been open and transparent on this as possible, and this attempts to continue that.
Okay. So this report is actually just for noting. So all those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Jeff, would you mind asking Councillor Jones? Okay, there are no questions, notices of motion and no questions of notice. So we then have minutes and recommendation of council committees. There is minutes of the rescue committee dated 5th of May 2020. Can I have it so moved? Councillor McManus, seconded Councillor Turner. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Are there any other questions in relation to that? In that case, then we will actually go to confidential matters. So if I could have a mover and seconder, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Drury, all those in favour of moving into confidential. Thank you. That's everyone. Thank you, team players at the back. So at this point now, as we've gone into confidential, we actually cease the live streaming at this point in time. Thank you very much for those that were interested in watching and following. Yeah,